the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so eminent, why isn't he here explaining it?
The vote was postponed on that day. After he tweets, it gets canceled. Elon Musk tweets, we have nearly 435 members of Congress all on board of it. He sends one tweet and all of a sudden, everyone backs off. And it kills drug pricing reform that saves people money on their insulin, on their asthma inhalers, on everything that they need. And then, to kick it off, 5 days after he kills pharmacy benefit manager reform, we get this tweet from Elon Musk. What is a pharmacy benefit manager? This was at 1:02 a.m. on December 31st of 2024, 5 days or so, a couple days after he kills the bill. So the problem here is not a substance issue. It's not a process issue. It's an oligarchy issue.
You could imagine how many Americans, whether they're here today or listening at home, when they heard over the weekend that Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, a billionaire, said that Social Security is a scam.
Well, I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
I think that in a political environment that we're in right now, it's actually just a tremendous glimmer of hope that people can have in seeing that there are areas in which we can agree. And PBMs are a perfect example in which everyday Americans who live in rural areas, who live in urban areas, working people are getting totally squeezed by essentially this middleman where their costs are being totally driven up, that their prescription prices are being totally driven up. And for once, we have Republicans who are championing this legislation and tackling lowering these costs, Democrats who are on board with this. And I can tell you, should this legislation come to the floor, this Republican majority has my vote. You have my vote on this, and you have the vote of many Democrats on this. Now, we've had this for some time, as what has been mentioned. Last Congress, Republicans and Democrats worked together to draft bipartisan legislation on PBMs. And one provision that made it into the December 17th, 2024 continuing resolution demonstrated how we can work together to rein in PBMs and lower drug costs for patients. We've seen how this can work, and this is a bipartisan measure that can propose more oversight of the PBM marketplace. Dr. Fiedler, can you explain how greater oversight can, in this circumstance, can help lower costs for everyday Americans?
So I think the most promising change from my perspective is the proposals to expand transparency, which I think would help PBM's clients get a better deal from PBMs. This is probably most important for employers, and my view is that over the long run, employers would pass some of those savings along as wages, lower premiums, or better benefits.
And we've seen this at work even, with hospital provisions forcing a little bit more transparency. We've seen costs go down when there's actual disclosure around what is going into these prices. Now, this bill was almost passed on December 17th within a bigger package to prevent the government shutting down. It has all of our support. For folks following at home, Democrats supported it, Republicans supported it. So why isn't this moving? It's not because there's no substance for it. All four witnesses testifying today are in support of it. Republicans are in support, Democrats are in support. So what happened? Well, on December 17th at 4:15 in the morning, Elon Musk began firing off a barrage of social media posts opposing pharmacy benefit manager reform, PBM reform. And all of a sudden, this bill that had almost unanimous support fell apart in a matter of hours. And the vote was postponed on that day. After he tweets, it gets canceled. Elon Musk tweets, we have nearly 435 members of Congress all on board of it. He sends one tweet and all of a sudden, everyone backs off. And it kills drug pricing reform that saves people money on their insulin, on their asthma inhalers, on everything that they need. And then to kick it off, 5 days after he kills pharmacy benefit manager reform, we get this tweet from Elon Musk. What is a pharmacy benefit manager? This was at 1:02 a.m. on December 31st of 2024, 5 days or so, a couple days after he kills the bill. So the problem here is not a substance issue. It's not a process issue. It's an oligarchy issue. It's a power issue. And this room is where the power of the people of the United States reside. Whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, everyone here was elected to be accountable to the people of the United States, not to be governed by tweet, but to be governed by their duly elected representation. And so we can get this done because there are more of us than there are of him. So I would love a commitment from our Republican counterparts who we agree with on this issue to just put it on the floor and let us vote for it where there is bipartisan agreement and we can actually get a result of for the American people by booting this guy out from political influence. And with that, I yield back.
This is indeed a sad morning. Very sad morning. When this committee, the oldest and most continuous in the Congress, neglects its responsibility and essentially holds this hearing today to block any further discussion.
Democrats are attempting to undermine the critical work being done under President Trump to root out waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government, all in an effort to save taxpayer dollars and make important programs work better, more efficient, and more effective for the American people. When Americans voted for President Trump, they sent a message that they want Washington to stop spending money on stuff that does nothing to serve the people. Every year, the federal government makes up to $521 billion in improper payments, according to a recent GAO study. No one can argue that we don't need to take serious and swift action to root out that waste. DOGE is fulfilling the mandate to rein in an unaccountable and bloated federal bureaucracy. This request for information is a nothing more than manufactured outrage that does nothing to serve the American people.
The men and women on this committee are good people. They're honest and caring people. And that's why I do not understand why you would relegate this committee to no longer being of significance and resort to saying you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so evident, why isn't he here explaining it? You know why. Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it. The American people, some of them may have been born at night, but not last night. People are aware of this. Every single one of your districts, all the money that comes in monthly, and you have not done, you as a Congress, have not done anything in more than 54 years. And now you have someone coming in to privatize a system, something you have longed to do going back to 1982, because Elon Musk thinks that this is the best thing to do. President Trump has called Social Security a scam. Elon Musk, as chairman, as Mr. Neal said, called it a Ponzi scheme. Ask that of the people in your district. Ask that, Mr. Smith, of the more than 198,000 people in your district who rely on Social Security, and you won't even let the person who's planning to privatize it, who's telling the big lie in front of everyone, in bold as he possibly can, saying, this is what we're going to do. The Congress is in our back pocket. We don't even have to come before them and testify, because we control the House, we control the Senate, and we control the presidency. And it's the tyranny of the executive. It's why these resolutions were first adopted back in 1789, because the founding fathers knew that the executive branch does not have total authority over the legislature unless you have a willing party that says, no, we're going to do exactly what you tell us to do, Mr. Musk and Mr. President. It doesn't matter to our constituents. It doesn't matter how much money they are not going to receive. We're not even going to tell them the truth about what's going to happen to them. And every single one of these districts where they're being shut down and their personnel, and as Mr. Neal said, then after you cut and eliminate the people, say the agency isn't responding accordingly. No other agency operates for under less than 1%. With that, they administer to over 70 million people in the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and children. Shame! Shame! Can't bring people in front of this body? If he's right, if they're so good, if they're so just, why aren't they here telling the American people about it? They're not, because you know the truth. It's about privatization. I yield back. You could imagine how many Americans, whether they're here today or listening at home, when they heard over the weekend that Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, a billionaire, said that Social Security is a scam.
Well, I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Right, explain that.
Oh, so, well, people pay into Social Security, and the money goes out of Social Security immediately, but the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. Basically, people are living way longer than expected, and there are fewer babies being born. So you have more people who are retired and that live for a long time and get retirement payments. So the future obligation. So however bad the financial situation is right now for the federal government, it will be much worse in the future.
It's a Ponzi scheme. That Ponzi scheme that assists over 70 million Americans is hardly a Ponzi scheme, nor is it a scam. What the real scam is to tell the American people that you need $2 trillion and assign that to a billionaire who has no accountability, did not have to go through Senate approval, is not a government employee, isn't even a volunteer, and yet he is placing his will on a Republican-led Congress in both the House and Senate. All that's needed is 3 Republicans to stand up and say, no, wait a minute. This is not what the nation needs. We do not need to cut Social Security benefits. We need to enhance them. Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, in your district alone, there are 189,000 Social Security recipients who haven't received an increase in more than 50 years. There are 147,000 retirees, 20,000 disabled workers, 8,700 widows, 3,700 spouses, and 9,000 plus children who are depending upon Congress to fulfill its responsibility and job. And furthermore, a fact that most members don't realize, and in your district, Mr. Speaker, in Minnesota, you get $325 million monthly that comes into those Social Security recipients. It hasn't been adjusted in more than 50 years. It's long overdue for Congress and for the citizens of this country to demand of their Congress that they take a vote, that they let the people know where they stand and whether they're going to stand with them and the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and children, or you're going to stand with Elon Musk and Trump to make sure that $2 trillion gets cut so that it can make way for further tax cuts for the nation's wealthiest 1%. At $500 billion plus, you would think Mr. Musk might say, hey, you know what? This is a great nation that has provided me these great opportunities. How about we care for them the same way this nation has cared for us? He won't lose a moment's night's sleep. But for more than 40 million Americans, Social Security is the only benefit that they have. They will be losing sleep over the fact that they're worried about whether it's in Minnesota or Connecticut, whether or not they're going to be able to get their benefits. The thing they rely on to put food on their table, to heat and cool their homes. This is no extravagant item that people are asking for. This is something they have earned and they've paid for. And their government continues not to act and respond the way that they should do. Mr. Speaker, we need a vote. You owe it to your people. We owe it to ours. Let's have a vote and give these individuals the Social Security benefits they need. I yield back.